You forward to a new body and continue the cycle, known as samsara. The verse right after that, verse 14, chapter 2. Winter, Krishna, summer, Sukha, happiness, Dukkha, and pain, giving, Agama, appearing, Apayanaha, disappearing, Anitya, non-permanent, Tan, all of them, Ikshasva, just try to tolerate it. Bharata, descendants of the Bharata dynasty. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O sign of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Purport. In the proper discharge of duty, one has to learn to tolerate non-permanent appearances and disappearances of happiness and distress. According to Vedic injunction, one has to take his bath early in the morning, and even during the month of Magh, which is January or February. It is very cold at that time, but in spite of that, a man who abides by the religious principles does not hesitate to take his bath. Similarly, a woman does not hesitate to cook in the kitchen in the months of May and June, the hottest part of the summer season. One has to execute his duty in spite of climactic inconveniences. Similarly, to fight is the religious principle of the Kshatriyas, and although one has to fight with some friend or relative, one should not deviate from his prescribed duty. Prescribed rules and regulations of religious principles in order to rise up to the platform of knowledge. Because by knowledge and devotion only can one liberate himself from the clutches of Maya, or illusion. The two different names of the dress given to Arjuna are also significant. To address him as Kauteya signifies his great blood relations from his mother. To address him as Bharata signifies his greatness from his father's side. From both sides, he is supposed to have a great heritage. A great heritage brings responsibility in the matter of proper discharge of duties. Therefore, he cannot avoid fighting. Om Gyanatvarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, how many of us have experienced both happiness and distress? Raise your hand. You've never experienced happiness or distress? Oh, it was a trick question. I said one or the other. but you had both. So, this is a very pertinent verse that is really very relevant, of course, to us. We've all had the experience of happiness and distress, and will continue to do so as long as we are in this material world. When I heard it, was meditating on this verse, another verse comes to mind from Bhagavatam in the 10th canto. It's quite popular. It's within the chapter of Lord Brahma's prayers to Krishna. Can anyone think of that popular verse? Yes. Ate anukampam susamik samano bhumjana eva kritam vipakam pridvad varutir namaste jivadeyo ipade sadaiva. So, Lord Brahma is stating, my dear Lord, one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy upon him, all the while patiently suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds and offering you respectful obeisances with his heart, words, and body, is surely eligible for liberation, for it has become his rightful claim. So I thought of this because it's understood that if we do our duty, if we follow our dharma, and forbear going through all kinds of happiness and distress, particularly the distress is the hard part, right? But that's the nature of the duality of this world. If there was no distress, there would be no such thing as happiness either in one sense. Nonetheless, what helps us to certainly keep our eye on the prize, so to speak, or keep ourselves on an even keel, is to know that, yes, these disturbances are going to come for sure. And it's a mixed bag. Happiness is there, of course. We don't want to just go on the negative part of it. But whenever we are going through this distress, we have to remember, as hard as it may be, and as much as it may seem that, this is the end of the world for me, it's all gonna get through this, never gonna recover it, chances are you will. How many times have we felt at some point, or multiple points in our lives, where we felt absolutely hopeless? Helpless, hopeless, finished, sarvanash. Yeah? But then if we're to look on those same times, if we look back on those same instances, yeah, they might have been really difficult. They might have been quite hellish. But generally, when we look back on them, and we think about how we were thinking and how we thought it, there's no way out of this one, and if we're just done for, somehow or other we're still here. Somehow or other the seasons changed, just like the analogy with the summer and the winter seasons. So the reality is that we all are on death row, and we have to suffer to some extent, because this material world is actually a place designed for rehabilitation, for our rehabilitation, just like a prison is meant for rehabilitation of someone. And while our spiritual life certainly mitigates distress to an extent by following this bhakti yoga and endeavoring it, actually a lot of negative karma, so-called negative karma, may be minimized, but nonetheless, something's going to be there. And even though it may be painful, it's actually, whether we can see it or not, oftentimes a test in order for us to become more surrendered, to go deeper into our bhakti. And also remember that distress that we go through oftentimes will impel or will make someone surrender, because they're feeling more than ever how to control, that they can't get out of whatever they're in under their own power, their own free will, because we only have limited free will. So we understand in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse 16, that there's actually 4 reasons why people look into spiritual life. And one of those reasons is stress. Can any of you think back and maybe consider, was distress one of the reasons that made us kind of go towards it? Because there's 3 other reasons, and we may have a mix of reasons. But how many was impelled largely by distress? Anybody willing to admit that? I can admit that. Yeah? There's 3 other reasons there as well. There's desiring some wealth. So if we're in some impoverished situation, we may want some riches. Better than that is someone who's simply inquisitive. There's a lot of searchers out there. I consider myself in the past have been somewhat of a searcher, like during my college years. And that's why it's it's an important time for us to try to connect with those. So that's why, connecting with the colleges and schools is really important. It's a very important time in their life, and we saw how much success the devotees had in the years past with that. And the best of all the 4 are what? What's out of the 4 reasons? What's that best one? Yeah, Jnani, one who's searching for knowledge of the absolute. What is the 4? And when it comes, if we go deeper into this aspect of distress that we all experience, and some of us have even admitted that that was one of the primary reasons for us coming to this tradition, coming and following bhakti. There's these 3 kleshas, or 3 types of suffering as well. So it's important we understand and dissect those as well. Pretty straightforward. What are they? Yes. Adiyaka klesha, Adibodhika klesha, and Adidevaka klesha. Guess what those mean? The three main categories. So we have sufferings that are going on from our own mind and body. So either some sort of emotional suffering, or some sort of physical suffering. We stubbed our toe on the door, we broke our arm. And then there's the Adibodhika klesha, or suffering from other living entities. How many of us have experienced that before? So that could be a mosquito, that could be another person or people. Basically suffering inflicted by some other entity. And then lastly, Adidevaka. That's natural disturbances. So actually it's a timely, you wouldn't necessarily call it a natural disturbance, but 118 degrees, some all-time highs here in Phoenix. So if you go out there for a few minutes, you're in the sun, you don't have water, you're suffering from the elements, that would come under this category. So those are the main 3 categories. So, as I was saying before, somehow we may think some instance, some trial in our life is the end of it, but somehow we need to get through it, and we're able to more easily get through it when we're armed with this knowledge and devotion. Together, we're able to with those 2 things together, we're able to do whatever duty we may have and make our way through it. And after all, it's so much easier to make our way through things that may not be so savory, may not be so palatable, if we know there's some higher purpose behind it and we got to do it. We can take a very simple, mundane example, and that is, when we were children, maybe even when we were older, we might not really have enjoyed going to school regularly, right? We would have rather stayed home in many cases. But because it's a duty, either we feel it up within ourselves or it's being impelled upon us by our parents who want best for us. So therefore, even though it's something we don't necessarily want to do, we know we need to do it. And therefore we go through it, we struggle through it. So that's just a very simple and relatively non-painful example, but the point is still there. And in the case with Arjuna, he did, what the whole context of his verses is Krishna's telling Arjuna, hey, you're a Kshatriya, you're a warrior, you're part of the kingly class. It is your duty to fight. So thinking otherwise and putting down your bow and deciding not to fight for the various reasons Arjuna made previously, it doesn't become someone of his stature. So one of the key aspects of the purport that Srila Prabhupada wrote was, he states, one has to follow the prescribed rules and regulations of religious principles in order to rise up to the platform of knowledge. Because by knowledge and devotion only can one liberate himself from the clutches of Maya. So if we don't follow a life of regulation and religious principles, then it's very hard for us to have that knowledge, what to speak of realization, to know that the devotional path, number one, is actually our param dharma, or our topmost duty, and that this is actually what will get us out, will get us out of the snares, of the clutches of Maya. Otherwise, if we just stick in it, there's more to come after whatever you're going through, and it'll just persist. Any comments, reflections? Yes.
Since the society seems to be reversing away from religious principles, I know from the Srimad Bhagavatam what's going to happen, but I don't want it to happen. And since the majority of people are not acting on religious principles, I don't know what to do.
Well, I'll tell you what you do. So for those of you that couldn't hear, we know that what direction society is turning. It's prophesied we're in what's called this Kali Yuga, this age of quarrel and hypocrisy, fighting. And we understand that we're just at the, relatively speaking, we're just at the beginning of this age, and that gradually things will deteriorate more. So your point about how people are getting less and less interested in Dharma and spiritual life. And you also make another important point that you say, I don't want it to be like that. Well, I don't think any of us wants it to be like that. So the question is, at least, what can we do about it? It's a fact that ultimately it's going to go that way, but Krishna doesn't want us to just resign ourselves and each other to just, to hell with everything, to hell with this world. He doesn't want that. And so even given the we can say the prevailing winds or the prevailing tides that are going on, we need to first arm ourselves with this knowledge and devotion, this jnana and bhakti as Srila Prabhupada is talking about. And then, very importantly, we also need to share that with others. We can't save anyone else unless, we can't give someone else something of benefit unless we possess it ourselves. So we need to arm ourselves with these astras, or weapons you could say, of knowledge and devotion. and therefore we're able to effectively, share that with others. And there'll be a positive effect, even though the overall, like I say, tide is going to. There'll be many who will be able to get out of that ocean, or that, per the analogy, out of the ocean of material suffering. So, if we're sincerely concerned about others, then we'll take some action, and that action is following, our dharma, and following this system, this process of bhakti yoga, arming ourselves with knowledge. We'll fight, but we're not going to fight physically as a battle necessarily, generally not. But we'll fight this tide that Maya Devi has put upon us. What's interesting though is Maya Devi, she has the thankless task of having things go this way. She's a servant of Krishna. So this is essentially, how the material world is rigged. And in one sense, like I mentioned before, many of us went to spiritual life as a reaction to some distress. And also it's stated how many of the demigods in the heavenly planets are, fighting to get in line to take birth on this earthly planet, because I've heard it said that these bodies, these human bodies, particularly here when we're here on Earth, having these are like our escape bodies. They're our escape pod out of the material world. Why? This material world being in the middle planets, there's this, once again, duality, like relatively even duality between happiness and distress, at least at this time. So the happiness comes and goes, and the distress comes and goes, and they're measured in just such a way that we don't have so much distress happening that we just get completely, finished. And we don't have so much happiness like there is in the heavenly planets and the demigods that we just forget about, that we just kind of get covered over, and we're primarily interested in just enjoying. So we're able to enjoy here to some extent, but we're constantly reminded. Srila Prabhupada used to say, there's this pinprick in our life situation, and no matter what we do, we can see that something's always off. We're never going to be always happy in the situation that we're in. It's just not happening. So, as I said, with that combination of happiness and distress, this situation that we're actually in, from a spiritual growth perspective, is actually very fertile for us. The suffering, the happiness, lets us taste a little something, and we're able to, get a little relief, but then boom, our heads get put back under the water and shoved under a little bit, then then boom. So in a very real sense, feel quite.
Everybody has different types of happiness, not same type.
Everyone has different kinds of happiness, not the same. Sure. Would you like to elaborate on that?
It's coming. Everybody, separate soul, but body, feeling the happiness at this. Only feeling that soul not feeling.
So the comment is that the body, it's arising from sense perception, this happiness and distress, but on the soul level, that's a different matter.
That's the nature of this material world.
Yeah.
Somebody had maybe distress or something, but other people can just enjoy that and feel happy. It's not a
Yeah. What Krishna states in another verse, which one is it? It arises from sense perception. He's stating that all these kind of factors it's arising from sense perception, but ultimately, like as you say, the soul is Satchitananda, eternal, full of knowledge and bliss. But we're so intimately connected the soul is so intimately connected and plugged into this body that we accept these pleasures and sufferings as being experienced directly, inherently as ourselves. Anything else? Yes.
You mentioned that Maya Devis are servants of Krishna. Everything was servants of Krishna. So how can we beat them up? How can we go beyond that?
Sorry, say again.
They have a higher position than us, Maya Devis. They're servants of Krishna.
Maya Devi is a servant of Krishna.
So how can we go beyond it? Servants would be of marvels. They're servants of Krishna.
Servants of Krishna,
We are just regular.
they're above us, and we're just some regular jivas, and they're empowered. She's empowered to ensnare us.
How can we go beyond it? If somebody is servant of Krishna, we can get them up and go beyond it.
Yeah. Well, you're not going to beat her up technically, but she'll back off when she sees to the extent that we're sincere and wanting to become a devotee. She'll back off to some extent. Is there any particular verses that we can think of to that point? Yes. Yeah, so difficult to transcend. Why don't we read that one? You have the verse in front of you? Daivi Yesha Gudamai Maya Gura.
This divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of natural nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross over it.
Yes. So the key thing is those who surrender. It's so hard to, pass through the Maya's energy, this energy, but by surrender to Krishna, you're able to cross beyond it. Therefore, like the main verses in the conclusion of the Gita is 1865 and 66. So you have Man Baba Man Bhakto Man Yaji Man Namaskuru. Become my devotee, always think of me, so on and so on. Take care. And then 1866, Sarvadharma Parityaga Aham Saranam Vrajya Aham Fam Sarva Bhakti. Basically saying, don't worry, I'll take care of it. Be my devotee.
Maya Devi purifying us. We have to be perfect for us to get to Krishna. Whatever she gives us, our purification makes us perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. I can say that I feel like I've gotten some realization of that, and pretty much anyone who's following this path, we have to some extent realized that. Krishna, I've heard it said, Krishna can come to us, come before us from the front, but he's also quite tricky and can come from the side. Well, let me back up. We're in this world of duality, and we assign, this is good, that's bad, this is a good situation, bad situation. On the surface, yeah, we can categorize like that. But ultimately, some very seemingly horrible or bad situation can actually be, a very important event that steers us towards Krishna more, steers us toward surrender, saranagati. I haven't experienced that it stands out so much to me like that. I feel like in many ways, I wouldn't, whatever meager progress I've made thus far, I feel like I wouldn't be anywhere near it if it wasn't for this, trial and tribulation that I went through. It's like that. So with that, reflecting on that, if someone would ask me, would you want to go through that again? Well, no, not really. Well, let's say no, not at all. But would I change it? If I could have erased it, I wouldn't erase it. If I could go back. Because that experience, that challenging experience, helped solidify my conviction to practice this process. Yeah. Anybody else?
Make the surrendering process easy, like an understanding of religion and behavior that is, this surrendering process, yes, taught us it's not easy.
Yes, surrender process is not easy. It'd be so nice if we could all just put up our hands right now. We do put up our hands in front of the DDs all the time. Yeah. You know what? One thing that I'm thinking of right now, externally we may say, oh, I surrender. But internally, really, where are we at? Actually, as soon as we really surrender, just like Draupadi really surrendered in the end, we're kind of like at the not even close probably, but to use that like analogy with Draupadi, at first, it wasn't pure surrender. It was only in the end. So similarly, at best, we're kind of just like putting our hands up, or maybe putting our fingers up right above our shoulders. If we were to like, if we were really like this, then, so that's another thing. Krishna knows what's really in our heart. Just like externally, we may say, oh, I love you, or this or that or the other, but what's really going on inside? And you can't trick Krishna, right? Okay. All right. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki, Samadeva Bhakta Vrinda ki, Jayananda ki.